All right, tonight we're going to finish up with transgenderism. We're then going to look next week. We've got 2 more weeks left before the quarter. And so the next 2 lessons that I'd like to look at is the first one being euthanasia, and then the last one being suicide. And we'll take a good look at them next week and the week after. Now, what we've looked at very quickly on transgenderism, that God only made 2 sexes. You are the sex at birth, whatever you are biological. And so that determines whether you are a male or a female. And we looked at those, gave passages. The next thing we looked at, or going to look at, is a passage. Someone turn over to the book of Deuteronomy 22 and 25. This is unusual, and I have read about and studied on this. There ought to be a distinct difference between a male and a female in apparel. I knew of a preacher, and his daughter was wearing blue jeans. He drove all the way up to Pennsylvania to tell her that the pair of blue jeans were man's clothes. And I thought, you get married, you move to Pennsylvania, Papa comes up, we're going to have a good time, we're going to grill out. Now, she got a lecture on blue jeans being male.
Did you discuss last week there are some children that are born with both?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
How do you determine that?
Not both, neither.
The male and the female.
Uh-huh. So. We dealt with that in the intersex. Yeah. But there's still, you still have a chromosome pattern of YX and XX. If you're born female, you will always be a female. And for us to perpetrate and agree that they are something different than what they are biological is a lie. And Christians are not to lie. We are not to affirm things like that. And so there's a deal here about men and women's clothing. So read that and we'll deal with that quickly.
A woman shall not wear anything that pertains to a man, nor shall a man put on a woman's garment. For all who do not do so are an abomination to the Lord your God.
All right, there's an abomination again. All right, is this generational? Is it cultural? Does it have to do with ethnicity? Cultural. And remember, God is talking in the book of Deuteronomy to the Hebrew. His children is who he governs. And so if you go to the Pacific Island, men wear what? It's called a lava. And it makes no difference whether it is, if the men wear, and I've been there, the missionary who was there said, Mike, you'll endear yourself to these people in the Yap Islands if you wear that lava. So I put a lava on a white t-shirt. So the lava is just a skirt, just a wraparound. And what I didn't realize is the women wore the skirts on the southern part of Yap, and the men wear, it looks like an old cloth diaper. That's what, and so when I'm going along, first of all, the kids are all laughing at me. And then I walk by the men who are sitting on the old stone, eating lobsters, discussing the world. And they're looking but trying not to look and laugh. And when I got back to that motel room, the preacher was laughing. And so on the northern part of the island, the women wear what we consider to be a dress. In the southern part of the Yap Islands, they wear, I was cross-dressing that day and didn't know it. And so, just know this. Usually a man goes to a man's store to buy his clothes, and there are some differences, but I do believe it's cultural in nature. One thing is that our dress should not confuse people as to what sex we are. And I think that's where he's going with it. One I read, it talked about armor, that a woman was not to put on armor. That may be a stretch of it, but we dealt with that my being a male should directly affect my behavior. And there should be no confusion about it. And a female, but even if you go to Walmart, I mean, you've got the women's section and the man's section. There are a lot of clothes that are unisex. But here's another thing, not only cultural as to where you are, listen to this one. Culture and society determines style. Styles change. I've got 2 dresses that belong to my wife's granddaddy. Little boys used to wear dresses, and I still have Jake's little dresses. And so, and by the way, women were the first one to wear breeches, not men. Men were still wearing skirts when women put on a pair of pants, breeches. And so culture determines the style. God determines the modesty. And so things will change. But there's usually always a difference between a man and a woman. Just remember, there should be no confusion either in our behavior or our dressing that we're a man or a woman. And I think that's where Deuteronomy stands. Mm-hmm. You know, who defines that exact point? There are, but you know, in some homes you don't have a man. The woman has to do everything. And so I think we need to be gracious and kind. And but there ought to be a distinction. And I think Deuteronomy is going with the clothes also. All right, what about sex reassignment? Now, we're dealing with the chromosomes, and so a man has what chromosomes distinct and different from a female? X and Y. A woman has, and there's something like 314 trillion cells that carry that. And so nothing that can be done is going to change a male to a female. These are some of the people that we watch on TV. And of course, the most popular, who has just re-entered the viewing, is who? Bruce Jenner. And for us to call him anything except what it is a lie. And Christians should not compromise our value and the truth. So there's nothing that any of these, of course the last one there is Chas Bono, who is Shea's daughter. But we see it every day. We see it on sitcoms, we see it on the TV. Satan works this way. Number one, he changes definitions. The second thing he does, he makes us laugh or make light of these things that are sin, until finally it's just accepted. In the Christian community, it's not accepted, it's forced. And so here are just a bunch of celebrities. Here is San Rafael Hospital in Trinidad, Colorado. The first sex change took place in 1952. Right here, between Dr. Beidel, and he was a master surgeon during the war. He is known for his humanitarian. What he specialized in is soldiers in that had lost from the waist down. And he was a master surgeon. And then he went to Korea. And when he found out that Trinidad, Colorado needed a doctor, he moved back as their surgeon. The first sex change surgery he did, a woman walked in and said, "I am a transsexual and I need an operation." And the question that he asked is, what is transsexual? And so he called up John Hopkins, to the man who had done the first. John Hopkins at that time was the hospital that did most of them. He called up and he talked to the doctor. The doctor sent him a hand drawing, and he said, "Well, I can do that." He had no earthly idea what he had done. And so from 1969 to 2001, he and his protege had done 6,000. The surgery starts at about 15,000. It goes up to about 75,000. And you will get a bill from the hospital that insurance does not cover for about 3 times that. And so it has been a very profitable surgery for these two. And again, he made Trinidad, Colorado world famous for being, that's where you go. Now, the one that is leading in gender reassignment, they call it, is Thailand. If you want sex assignment now, you go to Trinidad. 90% of those that have the surgery in Thailand are from different countries. It's about 3.5 hours in the surgery. But again, you cannot take a man and make him a woman. Nothing will do that, not even the surgery. It just feminizes who you are. And so God, when he talks about a male and a female, he is talking about his creation. This is what I created. This is the purpose. This is the design. And that's where Christians stand. And so the idea of having surgery to change is not going to work. It's like this. And I was watching a documentary about one of the most successful people who work with anorexia and bulimia. Have you ever seen an anorexic who believe that, they're skin and bone, and they believe they're fat? We had a lady in the church, she was a nutritionist for the hospital, who went through this. And I would ask her, if you were looking at a patient, what would you see and what would you think? And she never would answer. Anorexic and bulimia is here. And for you to call Bruce Jenner by a female name is as much as a lie as telling someone who is anorexic, you look just fine. Really, you need to lose a bit of weight, you're fat. It's all up here. And this lady would take mainly women from all over the world. She had no formal training, but she had a lifestyle of love that cured more anorexic women that did not have a recidivism rate. They did not go back into it. And so, to tell a man who's born a man, who believes he's a woman, that he's a woman, is a lie. It's as dangerous as telling that anorexic person who is looking to themselves, and that is where. If you, John, how tall are you? 6 feet, and he weighs 105 pounds. He may even get down to 60-something pounds. He's nothing but bones. And to look at John and tell him, you look just fine. Our son almost died with anorexia. One of the Christian coaches at Lynn, Alabama, where my kids did high school, every time he addressed Caleb, he'd call him little fat boy. And Donna and I thought we were absolute failures. Caleb got down where you couldn't hardly recognize him. To this day, he still suffers with the problem in his throat and throwing up. So someone hurt him so bad emotionally that apparently affected him psychologically that he'd do that to himself. He was not fat. And so the idea of having a sex change, believing and calling yourself a female when you're a male is psychological. All right, let's look at this. And this is what has and is being debated now. The idea about someone who is born a man, who believes that he's a woman, is allowed to go into a woman's locker room. Laws have been passed. And a lot of the time, these laws take place when no one else knows about it. Parents don't know about it. The community don't know about it. In Pennsylvania, they met at nighttime and did not inform. It was a student. A young girl was in the room, in the locker room, and a boy came in and she saw that he was a boy. Complaints were made, and he was told twice by the principal that he has to accept it. So it's not a matter of accepting things, it's a matter of being, and if you don't accept it, what are you called? You call what? A bigot? A bully? Non-accepting, non-loving? And so the locker room is being debated right now. This is where society will affirm that you can be called a female if you're a male. And by the way, when it goes into sports, I forget the distance. How far is 500 meters running? About how long? Okay. But the American Olympiad who won that race as a female, there are 24 high school male students whose time is shorter than our female Olympiad. What happens if they decide that they are female and enter the race? And that's what's happening. From New Zealand, there was a man who decided he was a woman and went into weightlifting and won the record. Is he a male or is he a female? He's a male. And physically, there's a difference between males and females. And so this is the debate. Many states are passing laws, independent from Washington and the rest. They're just denying it, and they're saying, we're not going to have this. So local laws are being made. Society tries to force us as Christians to accept the fact. And for me to call Bruce Jenner a female, I would be denying my Christianity and being honest and truthful. He is not. Now, this is what God says, and this is the only authority that we have. It's not societal, it is within God's kingdom. And you do not change people by treating them poorly. Why do you think so many have gone and reside in San Francisco. What? There's the acceptance. Eureka Springs, the same way. When you hate people, you drive them away. I had a member of the church in Florida who went online to find out the county that had the least amount of black people in it, which was Lake County, where I preached. When I asked him, why did you move to Inverness? That's exactly what he told me. He said, I went online, find out a county that the fewest blacks lived in, and that's where I decided to move. Is that healthy? Is that Christ-like? I mean, Christ dealt with Gentiles. The Jews hated him. But he went to the people that hated him. And yet, I mean, and you're talking, brethren, you're not talking about some vicious person out in the country. You're talking about a child of God reasons that way. Now, I'll give you a statistic. It may surprise you. It may not. The fastest growing economic group is a black husband and wife. I bought my house in a subdivision where blacks buy their houses and stay within a black community. Their houses valuate faster than white couples. And so when we treat people poorly, it is not the spirit of Jesus Christ. We are to be different from the world, and it is our difference that should attract people to Christ. All right, someone read Psalms 100, verse 3. Out loud, nice and loud. All right, what's he saying there? Okay. Okay. God designed me. He knows me. There's no such thing as a man trapped in a woman's body. It's psychological. But let me also tell you that in the American Health, what's the big magazine or the big book? Todd, do you know? It's called the American Health something. Encyclopedia. Homosexuality used to be listed as a psychological problem. And when the homosexuals and that got together, they had it taken out. And so what we think is immoral, an abomination, a strange lifestyle, someone will eventually force it out of those magazines as psychological. That's not acceptable. And so God knows, God did not, God does not make mistakes. Now, as Katie was saying, there are times when things just don't develop like they're supposed to. And that's not true just sexually. It's true with all of our body as it grows in the womb. Things happen. Sometimes it's after the womb. Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay. And what they're trying to normalize what God forbids. It's just an alternative. And by the way, we could go on with things like not only transgender, but trans species. And if you want, you go online and look at these people that, had their tongues done and ball bearings put in them and tattoos in their ears and to try and look like leopards because they believe that they're a leopard. There are cases now pending in court where I know of two that I was reading about where women wanted to marry one a horse and one a dog. I told you last week on one birth certificate there's 3 men that are the parents of this child. And they want to normalize it, and they'll do that through the television programs that you watch until it's just normal. Any questions about, and brethren, here, I think in a lot of this we're simplistic. Like I told you before, I don't know why kids, and I watched a young boy in Joshua and Caleb's class who was what we would call effeminate, which is not the meaning of the word that we discussed. At some of those ages, they're not making any choices except, what piece of dirt they're going to eat and everything else. Brethren, I can't explain it. I don't need to explain it. If your mother was a drug addict or alcoholic, you are presupposed or what's the word I'm looking for? You're predisposed to have those problems. The question was asked about, what about people who say they're born that way? If it's wrong, then I've got to spend my time finding out what God said and ask for God's grace and His help. I wish we could ask the brethren, but we usually don't talk about things like that with our brethren, and it might be a lot more healthier if we did. And we can ask God to help us. If it's a sin, we cannot participate in it. Now, where does homosexual, and we consider that, as Jim was saying, that's a number 10, that's not a number 1. Lying on your income tax, that's a number 1. We do grade, we don't want to admit, but we do grade sin. Someone is worse, but all of us have problems that we need to be praying about. And if it's unscriptural, we ought to be fighting it. And I may have to fight the sins of my mother and my father for the rest of my life. And I know one of the arguments is with alcohol. Well, he didn't choose, or someone's homosexual. He didn't choose a life where he'd be hated. I can't explain it all. I don't know. I've always heard, and I still read, well, they're that way because they don't have a loving father at home. To me, that's very simplistic. It's true, but it's very simplistic. They've done surveys on twins where one is homosexual, one is not, raised in the same family. How did that happen? So what is our commandment to those that choose a lifestyle like this? Do what? Okay. Mm-hmm. I think the relationship has a lot to do with it, but also we've got to realize that, let's just say that I'm an alcoholic and I fall back. Is that to be expected? It's not unusual. Galatians 6 verse 2. If a brother is overtaken in a sin, you cannot overtake a parked car. That lets me know that that brother that they're talking about in Galatians chapter 6 was trying not to. Have you ever been in a situation like that? You think to yourself, this is bad, I'm not going to do it again, and you may go 6 months, you may go a year, and then all of a sudden you have a relapse. It may not last 6 months, it may last a day. Who's behind all of this? And this is what we forget. Who? And Satan could not destroy God. He could not destroy God in the grave. I think in the resurrection, Satan had one of the worst headaches he's ever had. And apparently, he didn't know about the resurrection. And so if I can't hurt the mother and I can't hurt the father, who am I going after? I'm going after the children. And that's Satan. Every child that he takes away from God hurts God. Satan hasn't paid a dime for your soul. God has given his Son. He has proven, he's written a book of history to prove us of his love for us, beginning in chapter 1 all the way through to Revelation. It's a love story of heaven towards creation. Any questions? Like I say, if you want this material, you let me know and I'll copy it. You'll get my scratchings and everything else. Any questions? Any thoughts?
How do we protect ourselves from appearing complacent and accepting when we're just trying to love someone?
Well, I think the best thing to do is to look at the Lord.
If you saw me out with obviously gaming, we all know what that looks like, obviously gaming, where do you draw the line as a friend of mine, in your opinion of me, for being in company with a person like that? Although my intention is to love this person and show them God, but the appearance is that I accept this behavior. That's a fine line for me, as far as, I don't know if it's just public opinion, but I don't want to bring shame on the church. I don't want to bring shame on my family. But I don't want a lost soul on my conscience. And I don't know how to rectify the two.
What would you think if you saw Joseph coming out of Potiphar's wife's house, holding on to his underwear? Here's what's important. Through an intimate relationship with John, I know his character. My first thought, if I saw John in that situation, it would have to be, because I know you, John's trying to help. That's not what would be in the church bulletin.
Jesus ate with sinners.
Do what?
Jesus ate with sinners.
Okay? He's a friend of sinners. Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Well, see, I dealt with that last week. We don't even do that if someone has hurt our feelings in the church. We just leave. Uh-huh. And it's going to be long term. But far more important, as John said, far more important about what people think. Standing above that is, John, you always, always do what you know is right, no matter what anyone thinks. Uh-huh. Okay. Speak the truth in love. Yeah. Yeah. Caleb was stressed out when he came to visit Mama. And he said, Daddy, he said, and Judy will understand this, all parents should and do. He said, Daddy, there's just some things that you may have to ignore this weekend. I'm stressed. And I said, no, he said, don't be a parent this weekend. And I just told Caleb, I said, I'll always be your daddy, but I do know how to ignore some things. All right, next week we'll deal with euthanasia. And it's active today. The week after that, we'll deal with suicide. And that's not easy. But we major on homosexuality, we won't major on gossip. Uh-huh. And I think part of it is, I know for the best part of my life, I'm not going to be around a lot of homosexual people, so I can talk kind of boldly about it. But around people who gossip, slander, and hurt other people, it's different. We kind of speak boldly about things that really don't enter our personal world. Appreciate your participation and your understanding.